Have you ever read a Bible story that left you with more questions than answers? Imagine this: Jacob, on his deathbed, calls his son Issachar a strong donkey. What could that possibly mean? Why use such an unusual image for a blessing? This strange statement holds a key to a much deeper mystery, one that can change how you view not only the Bible, but your own life's purpose. And today, we're going to dive deep into that hidden truth. What if I told you that Issachar's identity, his calling, and his very existence were all wrapped in a profound, yet often misunderstood, metaphor? Jacob's words are no random expression. They're a prophetic declaration that reveals more than you might think about divine strength, sacrifice, and reward. But the truth is, most people miss the hidden layers, overlooking what God is really saying through this seemingly simple phrase. If you're ready to unlock the mystery of Issachar's true calling, drop a 777 inches the comments below. By doing so, you're stepping into a sacred journey of revelation, just as Issachar's story will unfold in your spirit. And to those of you who have supported this journey through super thanks, thank you from the depths of my heart. Your generosity helps us dive into these powerful stories and uncover their divine significance. Now, let's step into the world of Issachar and discover why Jacob's blessing was more than just a simple metaphor. It's a divine clue that holds the power to transform how we see our own lives. Stay with me, and let's uncover the profound truth behind those words. Who was Issachar, and why did Jacob call him a donkey? The story of Issachar begins at a moment that seems simple, but is layered with profound meaning, a moment in his birth that holds a truth too often overlooked. In Genesis 30-18, we read, "And Leah said, God hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband. And with these words, she named her son Issachar. But why would Leah, a woman caught in a silent battle for her husband's affection, choose to call her child hire or reward? These words, though seemingly ordinary, are far from random. In the Bible, hire or reward is a divine term, a gift from God for one who has endured, for someone who has persevered through trials. Leah, whose heart was burdened by rejection and rivalry with her sister Rachel, saw this child not just as her son, but as a reward from the Almighty for her unwavering faithfulness in the face of her personal struggles. Now, let's pause and reflect on the weight of this choice. Issachar's name is more than just a label, it's a prophecy, a divine statement embedded within his very identity. In Hebrew, his name comes from roots that speak of recompense, of reward. Leah's choice was not only prophetic, but also laden with a quiet tension. This name was born out of a human arrangement. Leah giving her servant to Jacob, an act driven by rivalry and a desire for acceptance. But in her eyes, this act was not just about rivalry, it was interpreted as a divine gift, a reward granted by God himself. It's as though God's grace did not bypass human imperfections. Instead, it worked through them, weaving the divine with the imperfect. What an incredible thought to consider God's grace flowing through human flaws, shaping destinies in the quietest of moments. Issachar's birth was not one marked by fanfare or drama. He was Jacob's 9th son, Leah's 5th. Born into a household where competition ran deep, where wives vied for the honor of bearing the patriarchs of Israel. From the very moment of his birth, Issachar's life was steeped in silence, in hidden struggles, and unspoken suffering. He was caught in a quiet war, a battle for acceptance, for recognition. This, too, would shape the tribe of Issachar: discreet, hard-working, resilient, marked by a strength born not from loud victories, but from enduring quietly in the face of adversity. It is this very quietness that makes Issachar's story so compelling. For in Genesis 49 to 14:1-5, as Jacob lies on his deathbed, preparing to speak words that will define the future of his sons and their tribes, he turns to Issachar, and the prophecy that follows seems, at first glance, almost like an insult. Jacob speaks of Issachar as a strong-boned donkey crouching down between two burdens. The imagery of a donkey, a creature known for its patience and strength, is curious. Why a donkey? Why not a warrior or a king? Why this animal, often seen as humble and lowly, bearing burdens without complaint? And then Jacob says something that seems even more puzzling. He saw that rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. Round, it was knowing. Let's pause for a moment and truly absorb the depth of what Jacob said. He called his own son Issachar a donkey. At first glance, that seems like a harsh judgment, an insult perhaps. But is it? Or is there something more profound buried within those words, something prophetic, something divine? Jacob was not just a father, he was a man guided by the Spirit of God. Every word that came from his mouth as he lay on his deathbed was filled with spiritual insight, carefully chosen and laden with meaning. These were not random or thoughtless words, they carried the weight of destiny. In our modern world, the donkey is often viewed as a humble, even comical animal. But in the culture of the time, the donkey was far from despised. It was a symbol of steady labor, silent endurance, and humble strength, unlike the horse, which represented war, conquest, and dominance. The donkey was associated with service, perseverance, and meekness. Just think about Jesus entering Jerusalem on a young donkey. This humble animal, chosen by the Savior to carry him into the city, speaks volumes. The donkey symbolizes one who does not seek glory or fame, but fulfills their purpose with quiet dignity. Now, when Jacob speaks of Issachar as a strong-boned donkey, he's not just referring to physical strength. No, the strong bones represent something much deeper: spiritual structure, inner fortitude, and the ability to carry heavy burdens without faltering. This is the essence of Issachar's character, a man who could bear the weight of responsibility and struggle, even in silence, without breaking. What an extraordinary quality! How many of us would want to be able to shoulder burdens with the same strength and grace? But there's something even more intriguing here. Of all Jacob's sons, Issachar is the only one who receives such a vivid and specific animal metaphor. Why is that? Why did Jacob single him out with the image of a donkey? It speaks to the uniqueness of Issachar's nature and his role in the grand plan. Issachar would not be known for heroic deeds or bold prophecies. He would not be the warrior, the ruler, or the visionary. No, his legacy would lie in something much quieter, much subtler. He would be the one who quietly, without fanfare, carried the burdens that allowed others to thrive. His mission was not to seek glory or fame, but to serve in silence, yet with immense strength. In the context of Jacob's prophecies, Issachar stands out as a symbol of what God values in the unseen, the unnoticed. He does not shine like Judah, the lion-like king. He does not reign like Joseph, whose dreams would shape the future. He does not fight like Dan, the warrior. But Issachar's strength lies in his humility. He is the one who quietly bears the weight that sustains others. He is the one who works tirelessly, behind the scenes, without seeking recognition. And perhaps this is where we find the true beauty of Issachar's story. He represents the silent strength that holds everything together. Then, Jacob's prophecy takes an even more intriguing turn. He describes Issachar as crouching between two burdens. What does this mean? What is the significance of this imagery? The donkey, known for carrying loads, now becomes a figure caught between two heavy burdens. Could it represent the weight of the world pressing down on Issachar? Or perhaps the tension between two competing forces or responsibilities? Whatever the exact meaning, this image suggests a life filled with strain, yet one that bears its load with humility and determination. Issachar is the one who will carry the weight, not out of choice, but because his role in God's plan requires it. Issachar is a strong-boned donkey crouching down between two burdens. Genesis 49-14. At first glance, these words may seem simple or even puzzling. Why a donkey? Why crouching? Why between two burdens? The image is far more profound than we might initially realize. This metaphor carries deep biblical symbolism about the very nature of Issachar's tribe and its place in the divine plan. A donkey, strong in its bones. Lying down is not a picture of exhaustion, but rather a conscious decision. It is a deliberate choice about where to rest, what weight to bear, and, most importantly, the type of yoke to accept. In Hebrew tradition, burdens were not mere weights to bear. They were tools of transportation. Placed on either side of the animal, they balanced the load to ensure that the animal could carry it efficiently and with strength. This leads us to an unavoidable question. What were the two burdens that Issachar was placed between? Were they symbolic of two conflicting kingdoms? The tension between comfort and duty, or the struggle between hard labor and the search for stability? Could it be that the burdens represent the tribe's dual calling to both physical work and spiritual discernment? Some ancient scholars propose that these two burdens were connected to the tribe's primary responsibilities. On one side, the burden of physical labor. The tribe of Issachar was entrusted with fertile land and the task of working it. They had an inheritance that was productive and promising, but it required hard, relentless labor. On the other side, the tribe was known for its wisdom and discernment, particularly in understanding the times. Issachar was not merely a tribe of workers. They were also known for their insight into the unfolding plans of God. As the Book of Chronicles notes, the men of Issachar, who understood the times and knew what Israel should do, 1 Chronicles 12:32. They were instrumental in advising the nation during times of great significance. Another interpretation comes from rabbinical scholars who suggest that the two burdens represent alliances. The tribe of Issachar was known for forging alliances, often choosing peace over war. These alliances were strategic and helped ensure the tribe's survival. However, these alliances came at a spiritual cost, compromise and submission. Issachar was not a tribe that sought out conflict or war. Instead, they were known for their quiet strength and willingness to serve, but always with a cost to their own autonomy. What cannot be ignored is the image of Issachar crouching. He does not run from his burdens. He does not flee the load placed upon him. He accepts it. But he chooses where to rest, where to place himself, and where to bear the weight. This is not laziness. It is a conscious and intentional decision. In a world that often seeks to avoid burden and hardship, Issachar's story stands as a quiet reminder that sometimes strength lies not in fleeing from responsibility, but in knowing where to rest and how to bear the weight. This brings us to one of the boldest interpretations of the text. Could between two burdens symbolize the spiritual tension within a man, or in this case, a tribe, who recognizes the delicate balance between two powerful forces, the force of duty and the weight of rest, the need to provide and the temptation to settle. Issachar's story reflects this very balance. They lived a life of hard work, serving the other tribes and their community, while simultaneously discerning the times without fanfare. This tension, this balancing act between action and reflection, labor and rest, speaks to a deeper spiritual truth. Issachar is not a figure of rebellion or conquest, but one who accepts a life of burden, choosing peace even when it demands sacrifice. And here we arrive at the most poignant part of Jacob's prophecy, and bowed his shoulder to bear. But what does this really mean? Was this burden chosen out of wisdom, or was it the result of weakness? The next phrase in Jacob's blessing, found in Genesis 49-15, offers us a deeper glimpse into the essence of Issachar's soul. It reads, "And he saw that rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute." This declaration, though seemingly straightforward, carries a wealth of meaning, one of the most enigmatic and profound statements in Jacob's blessing. The act of bowing the shoulder is not one of subjugation, but of voluntary consent. It suggests a conscious choice to bear a burden, not because one is forced to, but because one has willingly chosen it. So, what would lead someone to make such a decision? Did Issachar act out of wisdom, or did he submit out of weakness? Here, in this pivotal moment, we confront a question that speaks to the heart of Issachar's identity and also, by extension, the identity of the tribe. To serve, yes, but to serve in silence, with discipline and with constancy. This decision was not about pride or honor. It was about accepting responsibility and enduring hardship for the sake of stability and peace. And herein lies the tension. Was this submission an act of wisdom, or did it reflect a fear of confrontation, a retreat from the challenges of freedom? Let us consider the context of Issachar's decision more closely. The land that Issachar inherited, as detailed in Joshua 19, was fertile and rich with gentle hills and ideal fields for agriculture. It was indeed a pleasant land. Just as Jacob prophesied, the blessings of Issachar's inheritance were abundant. Yet with this abundance came a burden, likely in the form of tribute or taxes from neighboring tribes or peoples. The question arises, did Issachar, in accepting the tribute, trade freedom for comfort? Was the burden of tribute a mere price for a peaceful life in a fruitful land? This question introduces a significant tension, one that many of us face today. Submission is not always an act of cowardice. Sometimes it is a calculated choice. In a world that glorifies rebellion, fighting, and standing one's ground at all costs, the tribe of Issachar took a different path. Rather than seizing power or fighting for autonomy, they chose to serve. They chose stability over military glory, comfort over conflict. It was not a choice born of fear, but perhaps of wisdom. The tribe could have rebelled, armed themselves, and fought for freedom, but they didn't. Instead, they chose to produce, to remain in the fertile land they had been given, and to carry the burden of tribute. This choice of Issachar mirrors the wisdom found in Proverbs 15:1, "A soft answer turneth away wrath." In other words, by submitting to the yoke of tribute, Issachar chose peace and stability rather than glory through conquest. They understood something profound, that sometimes true strength lies not in fighting battles, but in knowing when to yield, when to accept a burden without resistance, and when to choose the long-term peace over the immediate gratification of freedom through conflict. And in this choice, Issachar embodies a powerful principle sometimes. The greatest strength comes from choosing what others may perceive as weakness, to bear the burden quietly, to serve in silence, and to endure with discipline is a form of power that the world often overlooks. In a world that prizes external victory, the tribe of Issachar shows us the value of quiet endurance and the wisdom of choosing stability over chaos, even when it means bearing a burden that others may not see or understand. This decision to serve and bear the burden was not about avoiding hardship, but about embracing it with wisdom and quiet strength. Issachar chose to remain rooted in the fertile land, to serve and produce, rather than to seek glory in war. And in that choice, they fulfilled their divine purpose, not through loud victories, but through faithful, steady service. The metaphor of the bowed shoulder in Genesis 49-15 carries profound significance, connecting to broader themes found throughout the Old Testament. The act of bearing the yoke is deeply symbolic, often representing responsibility. In the tabernacle, for example, the Levites were tasked with carrying the sacred utensils on their shoulders, a weighty and holy responsibility. In Lamentations, it is written, "It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth." The bowed shoulder, therefore, represents more than mere submission. It marks the faithful servant, one who fully understands the weight of their calling. This imagery suggests a man not running from responsibility, but willingly accepting it, knowing that to bear the yoke is to bear a sacred duty. Yet, as the verse progresses, we are confronted with a troubling detail, "and became a servant unto tribute." This phrase demands our attention, pushing us to ask a crucial question. Was Issachar's choice to serve a result of divine calling? Or was it a decision forced by circumstance? Was this divine judgment or a strategic survival mechanism amid the tribes of Israel? Here, the tension of Issachar's story reaches its climax. Was his service born of weakness? Or was it the product of spiritual wisdom, foresight, and a desire for peace? Jacob's prophecy doesn't leave us with a clear-cut answer, but it invites us into a deeper reflection. The following part of the prophecy offers a clue. He saw that rest was good. This phrase, nestled in the heart of Genesis 49-15, may seem simple, almost poetic, but it holds a key to understanding Issachar's decision, a key that has been overlooked by many. It speaks of perception, discernment, and judgment. Issachar saw the land and the rest, and he understood something that others may have missed. In essence, Issachar's decision was one of careful analysis and intentional observation. He evaluated the world around him, weighing the options before him. The land, he recognized, was good, a blessing, a provision. And in this judgment, Issachar saw not just the land, but the opportunity it presented. But therein lies the question, was this wisdom or complacency? Was Issachar's choice to value the land a mark of spiritual discernment, or was it simply a surrender to the comfort and ease of rest? The land in the Old Testament was always a symbol of promise, inheritance, and provision. It was not just a place to dwell, it was the embodiment of God's covenantal faithfulness to his people. In that context, recognizing the goodness of the land could indeed be seen as a spiritual act of discernment. Issachar, in seeing that the land was good, was acknowledging God's provision for him and his tribe. But the text connects this perception to rest and here. Rest can be a double-edged sword. When understood in its proper context, rest represents peace and the enjoyment of God's blessings. But when misunderstood, rest can become stagnation, the temptation to settle into comfort, if not led by the Spirit, can transform into complacency, disguised as prudence. And this is where Issachar's story truly captivates us. Unlike the other sons of Jacob, Issachar did not fight for dominance. He did not strive for a place of prominence among his brothers. Instead, he chose a path that, to many, might seem passive. He chose to rest in the fertile land. But in doing so, he made a profound decision to accept the peace and abundance of the land, even if it meant sacrificing full autonomy and freedom. This choice reveals much about the heart of Issachar, and by extension, the heart of the tribe. They were not a people driven by military conquest like Judah, nor by cunning like Dan. Instead, they were known for their quiet stability, their deep relationship with the land, and their ability to bear burdens with wisdom and discernment. However, the risk of this posture becomes evident. The line between spiritual wisdom and passive submission can easily blur. The act of choosing peace and rest could easily be mistaken for a retreat from the challenges of life. In a world that often prizes action, glory, and visible victories, Issachar's choice to remain steadfast, to rest in what was given, can seem like a quiet surrender. But is it? Was it wisdom that led Issachar to choose rest? Or was it merely the comfort of submission? This is the tension that runs through the heart of Issachar's story, a tension between wise discernment and the temptation to settle into complacency. The most surprising part of this choice, however, is the real consequence it brought. The prophecy does not stop with the appreciation of rest and the land. It continues, and became a servant unto tribute. The decision to rest in a land of plenty, to enjoy the goodness of what was offered, came with a price. The tribe of Issachar, while they chose peace, also chose the burden of tribute. In other words, what seemed to be a blessing, fertile land, and peaceful existence was not without its silent cost. The tribe did not experience complete freedom. Instead, they found themselves bound by the obligations and sacrifices that came with their choice. Issachar's story teaches us a profound truth: the goodness of the land, the blessings we receive, are not always enough to guarantee freedom. Sometimes, the very comfort we seek can come with hidden costs that are only revealed over time, often in the form of quiet sacrifices made in silence and obscurity. The land was good, yes, but it also required something in return. The ease of rest eventually turned into the yoke of tribute. This brings us to a central question. Was this the result of God's judgment on Issachar for their decision to rest? Or was it simply the outcome of a strategic choice to live in peace, accepting the burdens of tribute as part of the cost of stability? The prophecy doesn't give us a direct answer, but perhaps it doesn't need to. The ambiguity of the situation is part of its power. It forces us to reflect on the consequences of our own decisions, particularly when it comes to the balance between peace and the sacrifices it demands. Issachar's story challenges us to consider the cost of our own choices. What do we give up in pursuit of comfort and security? How often do we trade freedom for stability, only to find that the price of that peace becomes a quiet burden, passed down through generations? The tribe of Issachar, in their decision to rest, offers us a powerful lesson. Sometimes, the peace we seek is not free. The question is, how will we choose to bear that burden? At the conclusion of Jacob's prophecy in Genesis 49-15, we encounter a statement that is both poignant and unsettling, and became a servant unto tribute. This moment is undoubtedly the most jarring part of the blessing. But was it a curse placed upon Issachar? The text doesn't say that Issachar was forced into this position. It says he became a servant unto tribute. This subtle shift in language speaks volumes. It's a transition from a state of voluntary choice to a condition of servitude, a shift that carries significant theological weight. Issachar was a tribe that chose rest, recognized the goodness of the land, and bore the yoke with diligence. Yet, despite this peaceful existence, the prophecy concludes with a note of servitude. So, we are left with an important question. Was this outcome a divine judgment from God? Or was it simply the natural result of a series of choices made over time? To grasp the depth of this, we must understand the biblical symbolism of tribute. In the Old Testament, tribute was often associated with conquered nations, those who were made subject to or dependent upon other kingdoms. To pay tribute meant surrendering autonomy in exchange for protection, alliance, or survival. Israel itself experienced this when it turned away from God and was placed under tribute by the Midianites, the Assyrians, and the Babylonians. Tribute was not typically something that came voluntarily. It was imposed when a nation was defeated or forced into submission. But with Issachar, the situation seems different. This submission did not come as the result of war or conquest. Instead, it came by choice. And that is precisely what makes this part of the prophecy so complex and intriguing. There is a hidden tension between free will and prophetic destiny. The tribe of Issachar was not destroyed or rejected. It was not cast off in shame. On the contrary, it prospered in the land. However, this prosperity came with a price. It prospered under a yoke. Issachar enjoyed peace, but not full freedom. It was useful, but not influential. It served, but did not rule. This spiritual condition, strength without authority, labor without glory, wisdom without a throne, reflects a reality that many Christians today experience: a functional, stable life, but one that is inherently limited. How often do we find ourselves in circumstances that provide stability, but at the cost of greater autonomy or influence? Issachar's situation is a striking image of a life that balances stability with submission, wisdom with silence. And here, the Bible forces us to confront a deeper question. Was this state of affairs what God intended for Issachar? Or was it simply the result of a series of choices made by the tribe? Could Jacob's prophecy have been an exact reading of Issachar's character, an anticipation of his tribe's inclinations, rather than a divine imposition of judgment? In this light, the tribute that Issachar ended up paying might not be seen as a curse, but as the inevitable consequence of a mindset that valued rest and stability over dominion and leadership. This decision to embrace peace and comfort to live a life of stability, may not have been sinful. It was, however, a choice that came with limitations. Issachar, in choosing to rest in fertile land and to accept the burden of tribute, was not wrong in seeking peace. But the reality of this choice became clear over time. The tribe, though prosperous, remained subject to a yoke. This was not an oppressive yoke, but a yoke nonetheless, a yoke of dependence and servitude. It's a fascinating and challenging lesson for us today. The path of peace and stability is not inherently wrong, but it can come at a cost. The decision to embrace comfort over conflict, to seek rest rather than struggle, may lead to a life of functional stability, but one that is limited in scope and authority. Issachar's story reminds us that the choices we make, whether to seek power or peace, rest or dominion, carry consequences. And while the path of peace may bring comfort, it can also limit our influence and freedom in ways we may not initially realize. The hidden message in Jacob's words is both unsettling and profound. Not all slavery is imposed from the outside. Sometimes it is chosen in the name of safety, comfort, or stability. Issachar's story forces us to wrestle with this reality. And yet, the paradox emerges. Despite their posture of submission, despite bowing their shoulder to bear and becoming a servant unto tribute, the tribe of Issachar would later be exalted in a way no one could have anticipated. Out of all the tribes of Israel, they became the ones remembered for possessing a rare and priceless gift, the ability to discern the times. This is where the narrative of Issachar suddenly takes a dramatic turn. In Chronicles 12:32, we encounter one of the most surprising declarations in Scripture, and of the children of Issachar, which were men that had understanding of the times, to know what Israel ought to do. At first glance, this seems to contradict everything said before. How could the same tribe compared to a donkey crouching between burdens, a tribe that accepted servitude in exchange for rest, be described as the very tribe with prophetic clarity? How can a people marked by quiet submission become the ones entrusted with strategic spiritual discernment? This is one of the greatest plot twists in the biblical record. It shows us that Issachar's legacy cannot be confined to a single prophecy or a single posture. What looked like weakness became wisdom. What seemed like silence became sensitivity. Their posture of quiet endurance did not choke their spiritual potential, it cultivated it. The very act of bearing burdens in silence prepared their spirit to perceive what others could not. They may not have fought like Judah, nor reigned like Joseph, nor plotted like Dan, but they understood, and in God's eyes, discernment is often of greater value than conquest. The phrase, understanding of the times, is not a casual description of agricultural scheduling or practical knowledge of the seasons. It goes deeper. It speaks of the ability to read divine timing, to interpret the unfolding of God's will in the life of a nation, and to advise accordingly. This was no ordinary wisdom, it was strategic, prophetic insight. And notice carefully, this honor was not given to Judah, the tribe of kings, nor to Ephraim, the tribe of strength, nor to Dan, the tribe of judges. It was Issachar, the tribe that accepted burdens, the tribe that lived under tribute, the tribe that seemed quiet and hidden. This revelation reshapes everything we thought we knew about Issachar. Their silence was not emptiness, it was depth. Their submission was not futility, it was preparation. Their apparent weakness became the soil in which prophetic wisdom grew. In the very act of bowing the shoulder, They gained the sensitivity to perceive what others, too busy with conquest or power, could not. And in this, Issachar teaches us a timeless truth. Sometimes the ones the world overlooks are the very ones heaven entrusts with its deepest secrets. This conclusion shatters our usual expectations. When we think of heroes of faith, we imagine the bold, the warriors, the rulers, the ones who lift the sword and carve their names into history. Yet Issachar emerges with a radically different lesson. His legacy whispers a deeper truth. There is wisdom in meekness. There is hidden power in silence. There is lasting vision in the quiet endurance of those who carry burdens without applause. And suddenly, Jacob's prophecy begins to make sense. The image of the strong-boned donkey was not an insult, it was formation. The one who crouched between burdens learned the weight of responsibility, the rhythm of restraint, and the patience to discern. The one who valued rest and embraced the goodness of the land was not lazy, but attentive, learning to observe, to analyze, and to understand what others overlooked. What seemed like submission was in fact the refining fire of humility, forging strength of character. In time, the paradox became evident. The servant under tribute was elevated into a counselor for kings. The tribe, once dismissed as passive, became the spiritual barometer of a nation. The son, whom Jacob called a donkey, rose to be remembered as one of the wisest among Israel. The tribe that understood the times and knew what God's people should do. Issachar's story is not one of dazzling victories, but of hidden formation. Not of dominance, but of discernment. And perhaps that is the lesson for us. The world may overlook quiet strength, but God does not. In His design, the ones who bow their shoulders and carry burdens in silence often become the very ones entrusted with the clearest vision of His purposes. As we close the story of Issachar, one thing becomes clear: strength is not always loud, and wisdom is not always clothed in glory. The tribe of Issachar shows us that true greatness can be found in meekness, in the quiet endurance of burdens, and in the ability to discern the times when others cannot. What the world calls weakness, God often calls preparation. And what seems like silence is sometimes the very soil where vision is born. To me, Issachar's legacy feels deeply relevant for our own lives today. In an age obsessed with noise, fame, and power, we are reminded that it is often those who remain faithful in the hidden places, those who endure without applause, who develop the wisdom to guide nations, families, and futures. Issachar teaches us that it is not always about fighting battles or standing in the spotlight. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is to carry our burdens with grace, remain steadfast, and stay sensitive to God's timing. That is where real vision is formed. Perhaps this is the call for us now to embrace the quiet work, to cultivate wisdom in the hidden seasons, to rest in the land God has given us, and to prepare our hearts to discern the times. Because just like Issachar, our story does not end with burdens. It can end with influence, vision, and legacy. If this message stirred something in you, I invite you to take part in spreading it further. Hit the like button. Share this video so others can learn from Issachar's story. Subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss what comes next. Drop a comment below, let us know your thoughts, your reflections, or simply type 777 as a sign that you choose discernment over distraction, wisdom over noise. From the bottom of my heart, Thank you for your support, whether through super thanks, sharing, or simply by being here. May God bless you with the same wisdom that once rested upon Issachar, the wisdom to understand the times and the courage to walk faithfully in them.